Welcome to The Explainer. For decades, the goal has seemed so simple, right? Grow. A bigger economy, more jobs, more stuff. But what if that goal, that whole idea, is actually leading us straight towards a dead end? So today, we are going to demystify a pretty radical idea. It's called degrowth, and it basically questions the very engine that runs our world.
And really, it all boils down to this one question. The whole idea behind this movement is that you just can't have infinite economic expansion on a planet with finite resources. Something's got to give, right?
All right, so here's how we're going to break this down. We'll start with what degrowth actually is, then look at why anyone would even suggest it. After that, we'll get into the nitty-gritty of the policies, and of course, we have to talk about the big criticisms, and finally, we'll wrap up by looking at where this whole idea is headed.
Okay, first things first, what in the world is degrowth? Because, let's be honest, the name itself can sound a little scary, a little misleading, so it's super important we get on the same page about what it means.
Now, look at this definition. The two words that are absolutely key here are planned and democratic. This is not, I repeat, not an accidental recession. We're talking about a deliberate choice, a decision we make together as a society to scale back the parts of our economy that are, the most destructive. The whole point is to refocus on what actually makes our lives better.
And this is a really, really important distinction to make. Think about it. A recession is chaos. People lose their jobs, inequality shoots up, it's just a whole lot of suffering. Degrowth, at least in theory, is supposed to be the exact opposite. The goal is to actually improve our well-being and make society more fair, all while shrinking our environmental footprint. So it's not just about shrinking, it's about completely reshaping the economy.
So the whole movement really stands on these three core pillars. First one's the obvious one, ecological sustainability, actually living within the planet's limits. Second is all about social equity. We're talking a massive redistribution of wealth and resources. And the third one is maybe the biggest, a cultural shift, moving away from just valuing stuff and consumerism, and instead focusing on things like community, being involved, and just genuine well-being.
Okay, so that all sounds interesting, but it begs a huge question. Why on earth would we want to intentionally scale back the economy? For the better part of a century, growing the GDP has been the goal for pretty much every government on the planet. Why challenge that now?
Well, from the degrowth perspective, our relentless chase for GDP growth is the actual root cause of our biggest problems. Things like climate change and biodiversity loss from just using up too many resources. Then there's a crazy rise in social inequality, and of course, the fact that the global north is over-consuming at the expense of the global south. It's a long list.
All right, so if that's the problem, what's the solution? How would this actually work? Let's pop the hood and look at the degrowth policy toolbox.
And this image, I think, really captures the vision here. It's not about scarcity and everyone being miserable. It's about a different kind of abundance, one that's focused on things like community gardens, great public transit, renewable energy. You get the picture. Basically, prioritizing things that actually make us happy and healthy over just accumulating more and more stuff. And look, this isn't just some vague philosophical dream. When researchers actually dug into the academic literature, they found over 530 specific policy proposals. Yeah, 530. That's a lot. So it's not like there's one single plan, but it shows you that people are thinking very seriously and concretely about how this could be done.
I love this iceberg model. It's a great way to think about this. See, this stuff you might hear about in the news, like a universal basic income or a shorter work week, that's just the tip of the iceberg. Below the surface, you've got these much deeper, more fundamental changes. Things like dismantling hierarchies, promoting local economies, and really shifting our culture to one of sufficiency, of having enough.
So here's a look at the top 10 policies that keep popping up in the research. And what's really fascinating to me is the mix here. You've got economic tools like universal basic income, which gives people security so they don't have to depend on constant job growth. Then you've got hard environmental limits like putting a cap on emissions and resource use. And then you've got these social ideas, like more cooperatives and citizen forums, to make the economy more democratic. It's really trying to hit ecology, the economy, and society all at the same time. Okay, but let's be real. Degrowth is a very contested idea, and we absolutely have to look at the other side of this. It faces some really serious and, frankly, pretty valid criticisms.
So it's important to remember, degrowth isn't the only game in town when it comes to alternatives. You have green growth, which says, hey, we can innovate our way out of this. Technology will let us grow without wrecking the planet.
Then there's A growth, which is kind of agnostic. It says, let's just focus on good policies like a carbon tax, and who cares if the economy grows or shrinks. Degrowth is the one that points its finger directly at growth itself and says, that's the problem.
And this really lays out the major hurdles for degrowth. Critics point to some massive potential problems. First off, they say it's just too vague. There's no concrete, detailed plan. There's also a huge fear that shrinking the economy could be absolutely devastating for the poorest people in the world. And maybe the biggest one, politically, it seems like a total non-starter. I mean, how do you convince people to vote for less when we're all programmed to want more?
This quote really gets to the heart of one of the sharpest critiques, especially from other academics. It says, the research is mostly normative opinions. Now, what that means is that it's based more on values, on a vision of how the world should be, rather than on cold, hard data about what's actually possible, and what all the unintended consequences might be.
And this next quote just hits the nail on the head. Remember those 530 policy ideas we mentioned? Well, the criticism is that it's like having a kitchen full of ingredients but no actual recipe to follow. How do all these pieces fit together? What comes first? What are the trade-offs? Critics argue that without a clear, organized plan, you're not creating a better society, you're just risking total economic chaos.
So, where does all this leave us? Let's kind of zoom out and take a look at where the degrowth movement is right now and where this whole conversation is headed.
Now, despite all those criticisms, and they are valid, interest in this topic is absolutely exploding, at least in academic circles. Just look at the growth in research papers on the subject. It's shot up like crazy in the last decade or so. And what that tells me is that even if it's a fringe idea in politics today, serious scholars are taking it very, very seriously. This conversation is really only just getting started.
So I think the most important thing to take away is that degrowth isn't some single fixed plan. It's really more of a broad umbrella. It's a huge tent with lots of different ideas and visions for what a post-growth world could look like. It's a field that's constantly evolving, constantly being debated.
And that really brings us right back to the beginning, to the central question that degrowth forces every single one of us to think about. What is the economy even for? Is the ultimate goal just to make the GDP number go up forever and ever? Or is the goal to create a better quality of life for people, a more fair society, and a planet that's actually healthy and livable? The degrowth argument is simple. You can't have both. And sooner or later, we're going to have to choose. And that choice is probably one of the biggest questions of our time.